Spirit of God, come down. Spirit of God, rain down. Spirit of God, come into my life. Spirit of God, rain down. Let your fire fall on me. Oh, Spirit of God, fall on me. Spirit, fall on me. Oh, let your fire fall on me. Oh, Spirit of God, fall on me. Spirit, fall on me. I pray you rain down, rain down in my life, Lord. Rain down, rain. I pray you rain down, rain down in my life, Lord. Rain down, rain. Oh, Spirit of God.
Hello friends. So welcome to each and every one of you. Today we look into the history of David. Yesterday we were reflecting on how David became the king of Israel, though he was only a youth. He was anointed the king of Israel, but he did not come to the position of the king or to occupy the throne. It will happen only at a later time. And yesterday we also saw that how David is introduced into the royal court of King Saul. We know when King Saul was there, he was tormented by some sort of depression, and it is said to be the working of the evil spirit in him. And David is introduced as one who can sing and play the instrument, and hence he was introduced. But there is a speciality in the way David was introduced. In chapter 16, in verse 18, we would read like this: I have seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite, who is skillful in playing, a man of valor, a warrior, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him. Why such a long introduction is given to David? They were seeking out a boy who can play the music, play the instrument. But this introduction is given in view of the David who is presented in chapter 17. There he is going to fight with the Goliaths, the giant. And in that duel between Goliath the Philistine and David the Israelite, the destiny of the defeated nation will be decided. Therefore, in order to introduce David of chapter 17, this introduction is given here, we can say. He is a brilliant warrior, a man of good presence. He is a youth, handsome. And finally it is said the Lord is with him. And that is the determining factor according to the Deuteronomistic author in a way. Therefore we can see how he is proceeding. And here again we see when David is chosen by Yahweh, everything moves in favor of David. Saul is rejected, he is tormented by the evil spirit, God has left him, But on the other hand, God's Spirit is with David. He is anointed now as king. And he is in the royal court. Gradually he rises to the position of the armor bearer of King Saul himself. And later on we will find he will be victorious in all the fights or wars he will engage in. And hence we can see everything moves in favor of David, and on the other hand, everything moves away from the grip of Saul. That is what we can say with regard to the development of the stories in chapter 16. Okay, we also mentioned about the contradiction that is seemingly here in chapter 16 and chapter 17. Because towards the end of chapter 17, when David comes back victorious after killing the giant, Saul the king is asking Abner, the military chief, who is this young man? And that is concerning David. Whose son is he? And it was reported that he is the son of Jesse. And the contradictory question is this: if David is already in the royal court, in chapter 16 we find it, and he has become, or he has been promoted to the post of armor bearer of King Saul, how can the same king say that he does not know David? And that is the reason he is compelled to ask who this young man is. Therefore, the contradiction is clear. In the introduction classes for the books of Samuel, we had already mentioned about it. When different cycles or traditions are put together, there may be the problems arising from joining together of the traditions, like contradictions, repetitions, and discontinuity. And here is an example of contradiction. Chapter 16 and 17 contradict each other. And the question which is basic is this: when did David come to Saul for the first time? Is it as a boy to play the music, or is it as a young warrior to fight with the giant? Only one can occur as in history, we know. But both stories are kept together, and that is why the problem is here. But in order to combine together both stories and take the story forward, the editor could have tried in a better way. Of course, he has tried to solve the problem, and one of the effort for that is seen in 16:18. Then there is still another explanation given in chapter 17. In 17:15. There also we find David went back and forth from Saul to feed his father's sheep in Bethlehem. Therefore, author is trying to compromise both stories. Even though David is the royal court, now he can go to his home to feed the sheep, and thus he can come from home to the battlefield, as it is narrated in chapter 17. But the problem of Saul's ignorance about the person of David still remains as something unsolved. Therefore, this seeming contradiction we had already explained is coming from the fact that the stories are taken from two traditions. Both stories were kept in the final draft because both are apt for David. He was a wonderful singer and also a wonderful warrior. Therefore, the author did not feel it fair to keep one of the quality outside the frame. Therefore, he put both together. And he tried to solve the contradiction to some extent, though it did not work out satisfactorily. That's what we can say. Okay, now we come to chapter 17. Here we find one of the forms of wars between the nations. Philistines and Israelites are fighting with each other. And it was a practice of the time. If there is somebody who is extraordinarily brilliant in fighting, such a capable warrior, he may come forward challenging for a duel. That is, someone from the opposite camp should come and fight with him. And the outcome is decisive. Whoever wins, his nation will win. Whoever is defeated, his nation will be defeated. And they will become slaves to the winner. And now this giant Goliath comes forward. It is in such a dreadful way he is described, his stature. All these things are here. And 17:4, there came out from the camp of Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And therefore we can say it is almost 9.5 feet. Then he had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. The weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels, and a shekel would mean almost 10 or 11 grams. Therefore, the coat itself would be weighing, we know, almost 50 kilos. Can just imagine 50,000 grams. Therefore, almost 50 kilos his armor coat. And then we find he had a javelin of bronze. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam. We can just imagine what big instruments or what weighty instruments he was carrying. Therefore, a normal man cannot fight him. And that's why he came up with this challenge. And we find the practice was that the one who comes forward with a challenge to make a duel is to come challenging the opposite enemy day after day, morning as well as evening, and that would continue for about 40 days or 60 days. And if nobody comes forward to fight this man within this time stipulated, then also it will be said or it will be understood that the party that does not come forward to fight will be considered defeated. And the entire army of Israel was frightened. They did not come out to meet the giant. Nobody was willing. And not only that, if somebody comes forward, the king and the army should feel that this one should be able to defeat the giant. and hence nobody was there. It is at this time that we find David comes forward, and he was there to see his brothers who were in the service. When he came to see the brothers in army, he happened to hear the provocative, challenging words of the giant. And he just inquired why there is no one to take up the challenge, and what will be the reward given for him. And finally we see David comes forward, and it is interesting to note the difference, the stature of Goliath and David. David was said to be almost 5.5 feet tall, whereas the giant 9.5 feet tall. And all his weapons and also the helmet, the armor, everything was there, and they were all so frightening. And David said this, that I am ready to fight with. And somebody took him to the king, that is King Saul. And seeing this young man, David, Saul was surprised and asked him, how can you do this? And David very naturally gives an explanation. I have fought even with the lions, and with the bare hands I have killed them. Nobody knows for sure whether he had done it or not. And since there was nobody else, and the time is practically getting exhausted, Saul may have given permission for David to go for the duel. If there is no one, then better, at least the one who has come forward with that courage. And now what does Saul do? We see Saul puts upon David his own armor, but David was not even able to walk with all these things, the helmet, the armor, or that is the breastplate, then the boot, and also the paddings. Therefore, David said, I cannot walk. He left all those things out. And now he is proceeding to the giant to encounter him. And see, practically there is no weapon with him, no sword or spear. He had only a small sling. And what does he do? He chose 5 small, rather smooth stones, small stones, in order to be used in the sling. And he was very expert in using the sling, because every shepherd boy used the sling in order to frighten away the wild animals, and with sharp aim they could throw the stones using the sling. And David now goes toward the giant with the slings and stones. And usually we know, when two people are going for a fight, one is a giant and the other is a boy-like figure. The giant figure, of course, would be disdaining or despising this boy-like figure, Sometimes it is there's a saying like this. Okay, one should fight with an opposite of the same sort, or one who is almost equal. And here David is practically nothing. It is just like, if we make a comparison, a lamb or goat before an elephant. Such is the difference between them. But David never gets discouraged or frightened. And when he saw the giant, he became strong and courageous, and he proceeded towards the giant. And the giant began to mock at him. Do you come to me as if you are going to kill a dog with the sling? I will kill you, and I will thus despise your God and your nation. Your God and your nation is nothing before me. And he cursed, it is said, the God of Israel. And naturally, that was a war of words. We will see. Verse 43, chapter 17. The Philistine said to David, am I a dog that you come to me with sticks? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And therefore, it would mean it is a war in the name of gods. The Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the field. But David said to the Philistine, you come to me with the sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Therefore, David's deep trust in the Lord is revealed in this word. I come to you in the name of my Lord, whom you have defied already. And therefore, what is going to happen? This very day, the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head, and I will give the dead bodies of the Philistine army this very day to the birds of the air and to the wild animals of the earth, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and all this assembly may know that the Lord does not save by sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. Now we see, David depends on his God. His God will come to his help, and with his help, he will defeat the giant. That is his clear conviction or strong conviction. Whereas the giant thinks, in the name of the Philistine gods, he will finish off David, who is just a youth. And the giant is a brilliant warrior too. Therefore, the scene is set for the war, the duel. And now what happens? Both come to meet each other in the arena. And David takes a smooth stone, puts it in his sling, and he throws the stone at the forehead, towards the forehead of the giant, the only part that is not covered with the helmet. And the giant is advancing, and David is throwing the stone with the sling. And what happens? To the surprise and shock of everyone, of both armies, the giant is hit by the stone on the forehead. And we see he, because of the force of the stone, stumbles and falls down on the ground. Maybe he became unconscious because of the hit of the stone. And David rushes to him, takes up the sword of Goliath from its sheath and cuts off the head of Goliath. And thus he kills him, and thus the Philistine army is defeated. This is what we find. Okay, therefore, Philistines are defeated by Israelites, and the war is over. Saul calls him and rewards him adequately. Thus the story ends up in a good tone, let us say. And the young man David is praised by everybody. Therefore, this is the story that we find here. And when we go through this story, a few things are to be borne in mind. David has so deep a trust in the Lord, because he knew trusting in the Lord will give him victory. And he was fighting in the name of the Lord, just like a holy war. And he was helped by God himself. And David is already anointed, and now he proves has the ability to lead the nation in war and to lead them to victory. All this is narrated here. And therefore, this is what we can say. And the war is also, we can say, like a war of words. The words used are making some psychological effects too. We have already seen some of the verses. When we read through the text, we can understand it further. And as David claimed, God does not fight with the weapons. He is beyond the weapons. And he gives victory to David, one who did not use the weapons. For this is what we can see. This absolute trust of David in Yahweh gave him the victory, and David was able to defeat the Philistines, and Saul acknowledged his service. Therefore, this is how David earns a name and fame in Israel, we can say. And in the next chapter 18, we will find an interesting story. There is also another contradiction which we had already referred to. When he came back after the duel, victorious, the women folk of the city came to meet him, greet him, and singing the song. When Saul had killed his thousands, David has killed tens of thousands, which made Saul really angry. But of course, we know this is a story that is placed here practically out of the context. This has happened at a later time, but here inserted. Another contradiction we can see. But we will come to analyze it later. Okay, thank you. And let us reflect on the greatness of David, how God supported him in his endeavor. Thank you.
Loving God, we thank you for the blessing of reading your word together. We ask that these words of life, truth, and hope would continue to impact us in the days ahead. May your love and grace follow each of us, refreshed and blessed by you. Amen.